Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Unspoken Truths of Digital Leadership, Living the Leadership Values, where our guest will talk about the unspoken truths of leadership, the dark side, and the learnings from dealing with conflict with integrity. And today I have a very special guest with me, no other than Simon Hartley. He is a sports psychology consultant and performance coach. So, welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much. Very nice to be here.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time to share with us your insights in sports psychology and performance, because that's an area where I know, and you work with Olympians, athletes, sports footballers, and all sorts. So I'm always intrigued about the psychology that goes behind the winning mentality and the mental toughness that you talk about. So please share a bit about how you got started into sports psychology. I mean, what was your fascination into that area?
Yeah, bizarrely, like most people describe how they got into whatever they do by saying they fell into it, and it's kind of true with me. I failed some exams. I wanted to be a pilot when I was a kid, and in order to fly, you've got to pass a flying aptitude test, or you did in those days. It's particularly if you want to fly in the military. And I failed my flying aptitude test at age 17. And because I failed my flying aptitude test, I also then failed maths and physics at A level, because quite honestly, I hated both of them. I was only studying them because my careers teacher told me I needed those in order to be a pilot. So when I failed the flying aptitude test and I knew I couldn't be a pilot, I then failed maths and physics. And I had to kind of start again almost and choose some new subjects to study. So I'd always been interested in sports. So I studied sports studies at A level, and then discovered that because I was really interested in it, I was also pretty good at it. I went on to university, studied sports science at university, and honestly, when I went to university, I expected to go down the sort of there are a number of disciplines in sports science. There's physiology and biomechanics and psychology, and I expected to be a physiologist or a biomechanist, kind of hard scientist. But it was psychology that really intrigued me. And I can remember my my sports psychology lecturer in my very first year asking these questions, and they just pricked my intrigue. My curiosity reared up like a monster, and I just wanted to know the answers to these questions. It really, really got me thinking, and from that point onwards, I was kind of hooked, if you know what I mean. I just followed sports psychology, and bizarrely, I have since learned that sports psychology is a bit of a misnomer. The truth is, it's really human psychology. So what I now do is I apply exactly the same stuff in all sorts of different settings. Yes, I do still work in sport, but I also work with executives, work in business. I work in the charity sector, and I've worked in education and healthcare and the military, and all sorts of different fields, applying the same stuff to a different audience. So that's really where it all started.
What got you into becoming a pilot?
Well, my dad was in the Navy all his working life, and we always lived fairly close to kind of naval bases. And because he was in the Fleet Air Arm, which is the bit of the Navy that flies aeroplanes and helicopters, we were always around kind of air bases. So as a really young kid, we used to go to the family air day that they did at the air base. I would see all these planes flying about, and I just kind of thought, it's like when you watch the Red Arrows. I just thought, I want to be in there. I want to be doing that. That looks so cool. And I was that era. I was kind of brought up. When I was a kid, Top Gun was released and all that sort of stuff. And that's what I wanted to do when I was a kid.
Do you now have clients in the Air Force?
Well, actually, one of the when I wrote Stronger Together, which is about world-class teams, one of the teams that I studied in some depth was the Red Arrows. And because, I'm a huge admirer of what they do, but also they're one of the best teams I've ever found. So kind of enormous admiration for them. And really, kind of that kind of sort of combination of working and studying with people who I am fascinated by. It's a wonderful part of what I do. I absolutely adore it.
Did you get the opportunity to go into their organization and find out what really works behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got a look behind the curtain, and I've been privileged over the years that I've known 2 or 3 Red Arrows team leaders and kind of members of the team. So I've spent quite a lot of time just talking with them and finding out really the underlying principles that make them work as an organization. And particularly the elements of what they do that binds them together as a really strong team and makes them an incredibly effective team year after year after year after year after year. I mean, one of the really interesting and unique challenges with them as a team is that they have 9 pilots in the team, and every year they swap 3 of them. So the 3 most senior pilots in the team leave, and 3 sort of, when I say new pilots, I mean these guys have flown before. They're not new pilots, but they're new to the Red Arrows. Mm-hmm. So 3 new members of the team come in, and every single year they gel that team together and produce world-class performance day in, day out. And from my point of view, that's fascinating. How on earth do you do that? So of course I wanted to know, and when you start spending time with them and seeing how they work and seeing the sort of subtle but profound differences in the way that they work compared to other teams, you find out why they can consistently produce world-class performance day in, day out.
And have you been able to adapt those principles into many other businesses and strategies?
Yeah, absolutely, because these are human principles fundamentally. They're not sector specific, they're not domain specific, they are human principles. So any collection of human beings who are attempting to work together can use the same set of characteristics in order to drive their performance. And so when I studied world-class teams, the Red Arrows were one of those teams, but I also worked with racing yacht crews, with a Formula One pit crew. I studied chefs in Michelin star kitchens and surgical teams and, all sorts of teams to figure out what the common characteristics between them all were. Because my simple way of thinking about it is if I find common characteristics in all of these teams and they do vastly different things, they're likely to be pretty generic. And if those are pretty generic, we can adopt them too.
And what are the characteristics?
So the sort of founding characteristic is that they all have a very strong, clear, shared purpose. And this is key because strong, clear, shared purpose doesn't mean they have a common goal, or that they understand the target, or even that they understand the strategy. It's more than that. These teams understand why they do what they do, why it's important, why it matters. They all care about it. And it's not, when I say shared purpose, it's not just important to us. It's also important to me and you and you and you. It's important to people individually as well as collectively. Mm-hmm. So that's the foundation. But they also build on that. So that the second characteristic is that they have shared standards and expectations. They all understand what good enough looks like in the same way. And it sounds fairly obvious. I mean, all of these sound obvious, but actually they're really rare. And it's very rare that an organization genuinely, everybody within it understands what good enough looks like. And they all understand what standard that they need to deliver to. The third is that what I call a total appreciation for each individual. This basically means they understand what I describe as the size and the shape of all of the cogs in the machine. So they understand the size and shape of all of the cogs, how they all work together, and why every single one of them is vital. So they understand how everybody's role kind of works with each other. Something that I call the chain of interdependency, which is they understand that, I need to do X so that you can do Y, so that somebody else can do Z. And if we all do our bit, the team's going to deliver. And there's no sense of, kind of my bit's more important than yours, or it's not top of my priority list, because they don't start with my priority or yours. They start with ours and then decide what I need to do to support that and what you need to do to support that. So they've got that real good understanding of how they need to work together. That's sort of what I call the engine work of teamwork. The fourth is that they draw strength from their diversity. They understand that they're all different and that difference could be the weakness that tears us apart, or it could be our greatest strength, depending on how we manage it. Because if you've got very, very different people, they could just frustrate the hell out of each other and not work together because they're too different. Or they could be each other's greatest strength. The stuff that I'm not very good at, you're brilliant at. So let's work together, because we can complement each other. So they draw strength from the diversity. The fifth is what they call a brutal honesty. I tend to call it a complete honesty. It means they have those difficult conversations. And again, it sounds blindingly obvious, but this one's really rare. And when I talk to organizations and teams, most of them, if I say, which one do you need, which one are you really short of, this is the one that they'll point out, that people don't genuinely tell each other what they need to say, for fear of either bursting somebody else's bubble or destroying the relationships, or people aren't confident enough to give the feedback or take it, so they don't ever have those really honest conversations. And the sixth one, which is also blindingly obvious and most people kind of nod along with and say, yeah, that makes total sense, is that they're always learning. And then I point out that always learning doesn't mean sometimes learning. And it doesn't mean occasionally learning or even often learning. It means always learning. And that's why it's rare. Because most teams, in truth, are sometimes learning or occasionally learning. And a few of them are often learning, but it's really rare to find a team that's always learning. So those are the 6 characteristics that I found in world-class teams. And it doesn't matter what kind of domain you look at, it doesn't matter what they do for a living. Those are always kind of foundational characteristics of world-class teams.
And I'm nodding away here because in my corporate career, I found is that we don't have the difficult conversations because it's the fear of upsetting each other's ego or each other's pride and such in their work or themselves as individuals, right? And also the always learning. Like there's never really much chance to learn because we're constantly so busy firefighting. And when we're firefighting, we don't sit back and reevaluate and goes, what did we do wrong? What could we do better? And how we could improve it next time. There's just never been any time where we've made time for that.
Yeah.
So it's like a constant fight.
Yeah. And whilst these things all sound obvious, it takes a while for teams to build these things into their fabric, into the way that they work, so that they become kind of natural. And that's really what I spend a lot of my time with teams doing, whether it's a sports team or an executive team, executive leadership team in a business. It's to build these things in so that ultimately they can look at themselves and say, yeah, actually, we're pretty good on all of these things. And we didn't start out that way, but now we are.
Because the thing is, there's so many, everyone's got different personal values and everyone's got different beliefs. How do these organizational, world-class organizations manage to gel those together despite having different beliefs and different culture upbringing, different values and different systems? Because I've seen it in firsthand. I witnessed it in one of my fire team captains for Tony Robbins.
Right.
And the way, we always have between 100 to 150 volunteers in the fire team at one given time. Everyone from different backgrounds, like you said. But somehow he manages to, throughout that 1 or 2 days, is to pull together everyone's strengths and weaknesses and work together in one common shared vision or purpose. Like you said, the shared purpose is to make sure the fire is lit by the end of the night before Tony comes out with 7,000, 10,000, 15,000 people to walk across the hot fire coal.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, how do they do it with that kind of values and systems in place? Or
yeah. So one of the questions that I was thrown actually when I was working in football by one of the football teams is, how do you manage the Mavericks? Because sometimes, again, if you think about that strength from diversity, sometimes the Maverick is our greatest strength. They're different, and in sporting terms, usually this is the really creative player, but they're also potentially the disruptive one. They're the guys that don't follow the rule book. In basketball terms, it would be the Dennis Rodman of the Chicago Bulls team, those kind of people. And so how on earth do you manage those people? And the answer that we kind of settled on, and this is a sort of a kind of simplified version of it, is that as long as we're really strong on some core values, as long as we share some core values, the most important values, we can accept the rest. We can accept the differences as long as we're rock solid on a couple of core values. And in business, often, first of all, people don't understand their core values. Sometimes they've gone through the process of writing them on a flip chart or converting them onto a plaque that lives on the wall when you walk in or something, but nobody lives and breathes them. So they might as well not have them. Some, however, not only do they understand them and they've started to live and breathe them, but they then go the next stage and they recruit according to them. And they build them into the way that people are kind of performance managed. So it's not just about delivering results. It's also about how you are here. That's really important, because culturally, if we want to create the culture that we want, people have to be living these values. So, and if you understand what character really is an outward expression of who you are. And part of that is the way that you live your values. So, for example, if you take honesty as a characteristic, if you value honesty, but you don't live that value, i.e. you tell a few porky pies from time to time, you're not really an honest person. So honesty is not one of your characteristics. If an organization says it values honesty, everybody's got to live that value in order for it to actually live as a value within the organization and become part of a culture. And when we go and recruit people, we need to recruit them on honesty. And one of the things that I've also noticed world-class organizations do is they don't recruit the same way that most organizations do. They want to hire on character, and they do, because they understand how. And the very simple thing that they do, again, kind of simple is not easy, so there's quite a lot of depth behind this. They challenge people to demonstrate these characteristics through the recruitment process. So, for example, if honesty was one, don't ask somebody when they're honest, or ask them to tell you when they've been honest or not been honest, or when it was difficult to be honest or whatever. Don't ask them, because they'll give you a story. Might not even be their story, might not even be true. So don't ask them, test for it, make them demonstrate honesty, put them in a position where actually they're tempted not to be honest, and see what they do. So I was chatting to some IT leaders last week about recruiting on character. And one of those organizations spent a long time in the recruitment process, put a lot of effort and investment into understanding what people had written into their CV and letter of application, etc., and then really probing those things. So if somebody said they'd done X, Y, or Z, really probe it to find out exactly what they had done, so that we could see not whether they had those skills or even had that experience, but whether they were being honest. So it's, there are the little things that lots of world-class organizations do to test these characteristics, which enables them to recruit people who do genuinely have the values, which kind of goes back to your question about how do you make sure your team have the values. Well, you have to put these pieces of the jigsaw together in order to get a team of people who share those values. It doesn't happen by chance.
So definitely having a detailed process in place for those. Yeah. And honestly, it's not rocket science, but equally, it's not necessarily easy to do. They're fairly straightforward. They're fairly simple things. They're not necessarily easy to do, but you gain a huge advantage when you do them. Because most organizations nowadays, or at least the ones that I've been to anyway, just recruit based on experience basis.
Yeah.
Very rarely they ask you questions about values, characteristics, or probe into your beliefs and things like that.
Yeah.
And so where most organizations, I would suppose, have not as strong of a teamwork as it could be.
Yeah. And if you really look at the value of doing it right and the cost of doing it wrong, and again, this was one of the questions I threw out to the IT leaders last week that I was working with, because it must have been maybe a year, 18 months ago. I delivered a masterclass on this. One of the guys in the masterclass was a sales director. I asked the question, I said, what's the cost of getting it wrong per person? And so he was talking about recruiting salespeople. And he said, on average, it's probably about 25, maybe 30 grand per person. If you take it into account, there's probably a recruitment fee in there. As well as the recruitment fee, you're going to be paying their wages for a certain period of time. You're going to invest into their training and, all of those sorts of things. If you add it up, plus the time and effort that everybody has to put into managing that person, it's probably 25, 30 grand. And for most people, if they're not the right person, they stay in the organization for 6 to 9 months before they're deselected. So that's quite an investment. Okay, I said, so the cost of getting it wrong is 25, 30 grand. What's the value of getting it right? And he said, at least 100. So the difference between getting it right and getting it wrong is 125, 130 grand. And I said, that's why it's worth spending a bit more time and a bit more effort and a bit more thinking up front into how you recruit these people, to make sure you get not just the person with the skill set or the experience or the qualifications or whatever, you get the right person into the team. Because the other thing that goes alongside this, of course, is that the All Blacks rugby team describe culture as collective character. So they understand that if we don't get the character right, we're never going to get the culture right. So we need to make sure we've got the right people as well as the right players in rugby terms.
Would that be the same philosophy as what's happening at Manchester United as well, then?
I honestly, if you look around sport, if you look into businesses, you will start to see those organizations that get it right and those that really don't. And actually sport's a really good example, because you can often see, one football club, for example, will spend millions and millions, hundreds of millions of pounds on a talented player that doesn't fit with the culture, doesn't add to the culture. And somebody else goes and picks up, a player at a couple of million, and they're brilliant. And you just think, well, okay, what's the difference then? Because one might be classically more talented than the other, and yet one's far more valuable than the other to the team. So how do you select those people? And actually, when you look at the way that organizations do it, I was listening actually some commentary on one of the Champions League games last night, and one of the clubs that I spent some time with over the last couple of years was playing in this particular game, and the commentator said these guys are clearly recruiting differently. They're signing players that other teams have overlooked, and yet they come into this team and they're brilliant for them. It's a bit like Alex Ferguson used to do at Manchester United. And I know Alex Ferguson used to spend a lot of time understanding the person as well as the player that he was recruiting. And when he deselected people, it wasn't because their playing standard had gone down, it's because they didn't fit culturally anymore.
That's interesting. When you start looking back at the history and the process that actually happened with the big stars that fell out of the team, it wasn't because they're playing standards, they're still playing high quality professional football. It was because something happened in their lives at that time that didn't fit the team culturally.
Completely. Yeah. And so when you look at the sort of the story behind the story for a lot of these things, you start to understand why leaders like Alex Ferguson and Hansi Flick and people like that are making the decisions that they're making.
So, curious questions now coming up into the mental toughness is what sort of disciplines or exercises can people build into their lives to develop mental resilience and mental toughness, like you call it?
Yeah, on a really sort of basic foundational level, it really means challenging yourself and getting outside of your comfort zone, kind of almost as often as possible in as many different ways as possible. putting yourself in a position where you're going to make a mistake, you're going to fail, you've got to learn from it, you've got to come back from that, and pushing yourself and stretching yourself on that basis, because there's people normally they recognize what their comfort zone is. The comfort zone is the stuff that you're familiar with, you know how to do, you can do it fairly easily. And beyond that, of course, is what I call our discomfort zone. That's the stuff you're not very good at yet, you're not familiar with, it's not within your skill set. When you go out into your discomfort zone, you will make mistakes and fail. But there's a couple of things that happen at the same time. So when you step outside of your comfort zone and you stay there for long enough, then your comfort zone grows to encompass the things that you didn't used to be able to do. But you kind of can now. And it didn't come easily at first, and you had to make some mistakes, but you learned from it. And then your comfort zone kind of grew, encompassed that stuff. Now it's comfortable. And the really world-class athletes I've worked with, and not just athletes, but, world-class people, as soon as the comfort zone catches up with them, they step out again into discomfort. And then the comfort zone grows again, and then they step out. And that process in itself is incredibly valuable. But there's a lot of things that come with it. So when you consistently have to come back from making mistakes and learn from them and come back stronger, in the process you develop resilience, because that's what resilience is. It's our bounce back ability and our ability to perform in adversity. So we kind of learn that. We also start developing some new beliefs. And when you keep stepping outside of your comfort zone, time after time after time, you also develop a belief that just because you can't do it yet, it doesn't mean you won't be able to. You just need to step outside of your comfort zone, stay there for long enough, and then you will be able to do it. And that belief kind of, drives you. After a few evolutions of it, it kind of gives you that belief that, well, anything's possible.
Mm-hmm.
It might seem difficult, it might seem impossible, but why not? Let's just give it a go. And it kind of gives us what Carol Dweck termed a growth mindset. That belief that I can take on anything. Interestingly, the opposite of this is also true. So if you never go near the boundaries of your comfort zone, if you never take on the stuff that you probably can do, even though it's a bit tough, and you stay close to the cozy center, as I call it, then your comfort zone will kind of shrink around you. And if you kind of see the walls coming closer, and then you retreat even closer to the center, and it shrinks and it shrinks and it shrinks, not only do you start to kind of erode your skill space, but you also start developing another belief, which is, if I can't do it now, I'm not likely to be able to. And if there's something I can't do, there's no point in trying, because I can't do it. This is what Carol Dweck calls a fixed mindset. But importantly, we're not born with either a growth or a fixed mindset. We're not born with the belief that we can do it or we can't. We cultivate it. And we're continually either growing our comfort zone or it's shrinking. It's not static. It's never been static. It never will be. We're either fueling the belief that if we can't do it now, we'll just find a way, or we perpetuate the belief that if we can't do it now, we'll never be able to.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to understand we drive those things.
And for you, Simon, personally, before you got into coaching, training, public speaking, consulting and all those, was you a natural public speaker?
No, absolutely not. This is about probably 3 or 4 years ago. I came off of stage. I'd just been delivering a global leadership conference for a big US multinational, multi-billion pound business. And there were sort of 200 people maybe in the global leadership conference. I came off stage and this lady came up to me, really lovely lady, and said, "Oh, you're such a natural." And I said to her, "Thank you very much." I said, "So far, it's taken me 15 years to become a natural." And there's, if you kind of think about the truth in that statement, to appear natural takes usually a lot of hard work.
Mm-hmm.
The myth is, if somebody makes it look easy, the myth is it's easy. No, they just made it look easy because they've become that proficient at it. And I think sometimes, lots of people get daunted because somebody else makes it look easy, so they think it is easy. then they try it and it's not so easy after all. And then they start to understand the gap between themselves and, this person. It's like, I'll stick some tunes on one day and, drive down the road and put the music on, and I'll be singing in the car and think, geez, how on earth did that guy reach that note or go from that note to that note? That's incredible. Well, how many hours of practice and, sort of honing that skill did they do to be able to do that? And I'm just singing along in a car. It's not something I've really practiced, so I can't really expect myself to be able to do it. So yeah, I've started to really appreciate that it takes an awful lot of work to get to the point of looking natural or kind of looking like you're proficient at something.
And what was it like for you when you started doing your first public speaking on stage?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of evolved into it over time. I suppose one of the things I had as a foundation, I'd done quite a bit of coaching. And when I was doing both my kind of sports psychology work, when I was in and around university and just coming out of university, I also did some teaching at university and at one of the local colleges. So I'd sort of got a bit of a foundation of standing in front of a room of people. So it wasn't from scratch. And I think, I'd become comfortable enough with a subject area that I felt like I could kind of talk about it and interact with people on it. I mean, one of those things that a professional speaker said to me when I sort of first got started was, you can tell how good a professional speaker is not by the keynote, but by the Q&A. That's where you'll find out about their depth of knowledge, because anybody can practice something and, kind of re-deliver it. But that's where you find out how good they are and how they can flex to an audience. So because I'd been in those sorts of environments, I had a foundation of doing that. But I gave myself, kind of a journey, almost like a set of stairs, where I would do some things for free, just go out there and sort of build up my both my skill level and my confidence. I started to understand that there were some fundamental pieces that I needed. I needed to really understand what the audience needed and valued, and therefore I could gear the session towards delivering them the greatest value. If I didn't understand what they needed or valued, I was guessing. So that was one of the fundamental pieces. I needed to really work on creating a narrative throughout the keynote or the session that I was delivering, so that it linked logically from one part to the next. And that I didn't sort of dive off and into some random area and then dive back again, because somebody's brain finds it difficult to follow that. I needed to create a logical flow for them. Then I needed to practice it and work through lots of the little phrases, particularly the linking parts between one and the next, one sort of topic area and the next. And when I became really comfortable with that, I knew the process, then I could start to work that process. And that also gave me the confidence to go from doing it for free to charging some expenses, to charging a bit more, an actual fee, but not a professional speaker rate fee at that time. It was just almost like a token fee. Mm-hmm. And my confidence that I was delivering value every time fueled that process. When I got the feedback and people said that was brilliant, gave me great value, got loads to think about, et cetera, loads of takeaways. That's what fueled my confidence to go and do some more of it. And it was really a kind of a gradual staircase. I know some people that sort of try and leap from nothing into everything. They haven't done very much and they fancy earning $3,000 a keynote. Well, that doesn't often happen. From my point of view anyway, I preferred the gradual staircase. I felt like I'd almost had sort of a schooling in it, almost like an apprenticeship kind of experience in it. Which gives me a strong foundation. And
when you did suffer, if any, setbacks and tensions and stress, how did you deal with those kind of situations, like the anxiety before going on stage and what if?
I started to learn that actually, just like the athletes that I was working with, if I was feeling nervous or anxious, and I mean more than the little butterflies, because I think the butterflies are just natural part of the process. If I was feeling kind of at all nervous or anxious, it's probably because I hadn't really ticked off one of these bits of the process properly. Maybe I hadn't really talked to the conference organizers about what the audience really needed from the event, what the event was all about, what they were looking to give, where my part fitted into the whole. Maybe I didn't understand that well enough. So maybe I was kind of coming in with my keynote, hoping it would fit. And if so, I might feel a bit of angst. Or maybe I hadn't given it as much practice as I really needed. And when I started to figure out that actually the nervousness was because usually there was a lack of preparation somewhere, I knew how to control it. Just make sure you've ticked all those boxes and prepared properly. And if you I don't know about every other professional speaker, but from my point of view, if I'm delivering a keynote at a conference, there's 6 to 8 weeks preparation in there.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 weeks kind of hard practice driving up and down the road, when I'd probably prefer, honestly, to be listening to tunes on Spotify or on the radio or whatever. I'm not. The radio's off and I'm practicing. And it's hard work. In terms of concentration, that's hard work. And, you finish working through it in your mind, and a 45-minute keynote or whatever, it's tiring. You're knackered. But you're going to do it once, you're going to do it another, you're going to do it time after that, you're going to do it time after that. You're going to keep doing it until it's nailed in your head.
And that's the type of work that people don't see behind the scenes.
Completely. Yeah, but that is also the bit that allows you to, whilst you've got butterflies, allows you to feel really confident when you're sitting there and they're announcing you, really confident that you're going to go and deliver some fantastic value.
Mm. When you went into business, or started out in business anyway, what was your, I suppose, routine in terms of setting up your structure and how you overcome the tension and the stress that comes with it, like the real dark stuff, the real do I have enough to pay the bills for the month and all those when you first started out? Like, what was the type of thought process that you developed to overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, I do recognize those times. I mean, fortunately, from my point of view, they're probably 10 years-ish ago now. But yeah, I mean, I have been there. I've had those staring at the void moments. And I mean, I can remember on one occasion, before our current business, a previous business that I was working in, which, I'd set up and I'd founded with a co-founder. We were in that position where I had to make a decision: do I pay myself or do I pay the team? Mm-hmm. Because there wasn't enough money in the kitty to do both. And we decided to pay the team, or I decided to pay the team, which meant that we went without. And I can remember at that time distinctly, I was driving along a dual carriageway. At that time, also my wife's mother, my mother-in-law, was really ill and kind of terminally ill. So we'd also made the decision that she was going to stop working. We were going to be a salary down. We'd sold my nice 4x4, cashed that in, bought a little hatchback for me to pootle around in. And the money was kind of drying up. So I was driving along this ring road thinking, I'm a failure. I've screwed this up somehow. And I remember going back to a conversation I'd had with, it was one of the guys I worked with in my kind of first full-time professional sports job. And he was a sort of strength and conditioning coach, fitness coach. And he said, in this industry, better you are, the more you earn. And I thought, okay, I was in my mid-20s. I was fairly impressionable. I thought, this guy must know what he's talking about. He's been there and done it. So I sort of trusted that for a bit. And I was driving around this ring road, and my head was up my backside, honestly, not being able to pay ourselves. And I thought, I could hear his words echoing around in my head. And I thought, is it true? Is it true? Is it true that the better you are, the more you earn? Because a couple of years ago, I was earning 3 times as much as I am now, but I'm better now. I'm a better practitioner. I give more value than I did back then. It doesn't work, does it? It's not true. And then I said to myself, you are not the money in your pocket. You are not the car that you drive. You are not the size of your house. You're not any of those things. Those things do not dictate whether you're successful or not. That's not how it works. So I started to ask myself the question, well, what does dictate how successful you are then? And that was the kind of seed that led me to understanding that I now define my success, or I define success as being proud of who you are. Not what you do, not what you've earned, not what you've accomplished, not what awards you've got, none of that. For an athlete, it's not the number of trophies on the shelf or medals or whatever. That's not what defines your success. Because, if somebody had landed £1 million contract on me the day after I was driving around that dual carriageway, thinking that I was at the bottom of the pit, I wouldn't have been any more or less successful, even though I've got £1 million in the bank. So you've got to get beyond that to understand what success is. Around that time, because it was also at the time of the last recession, when the last recession started to bite. I was sitting in our kitchen, sun streaming through the window, and we were literally down to the last £10 in the world. And I had 2 little daughters next door, and I was thinking, how the hell am I going to feed them? I can remember getting on the phone to my mum at the time and saying, I've screwed this up. I failed. Can't even feed my family. What kind of a dad am I? And again, that understanding kind of hit me that, well, first of all, I figured out that I was too busy following the dollar or chasing the dollar, and not busy enough following my passion. And that I needed to get back to following my passion rather than chasing the dollar. And when I did that, everything would sort itself out. I actually had a kick up the butt from my wife on that one. She gave me the steer on that one. And it's these fundamentals, I think, going back to what's your passion, what are you good at? Just do that really, really well. Yes, you need to make sure you've got a business model around it that means that you get money from it and you can start paying the bills. But if you lose sight of that because you're too busy chasing the dollar, you're just going to run around in circles like a madman, and probably be pretty unfulfilled on every level if you do that. So go back to doing what you do really well. Provide massive value for people. Business is all about value. You're never going to earn any money if you're not giving value. So what's the value I'm giving? How do I translate that value into pounds? Just go and do more of it. Give more value, and make sure that as you're doing it, you're converting it into pounds. That's the absolute fundamental. If what you do isn't worth somebody else paying for, you're going to find it really difficult to sell. So go and give massive value. What's that?
And since then, you've been always positive. How do you keep that state of being positive all the time?
Yeah, it's again, it comes back to some fundamentals. One is understanding that I'm happy with who I am, and that doesn't come at a snap of a finger, and it's definitely part of the easier said than done category. But for me, that's one of the real foundations: being able to look myself in the mirror and say, "I like you." Fundamentally, you're not perfect. Absolutely, you're not perfect, but I look at myself and I think you're a pretty good husband, and you're a pretty good dad, and you're a pretty good friend. You're living the values that you hold most dear. So, whilst it's not always easy, one of my highest values is honesty. It's not always easy to be honest, but I can genuinely look myself in the eye and say, yeah, you're an honest person. Even though sometimes it would be easier if you weren't, but you are. And it's being able to do that I think is one of the absolute foundations, because ultimately, if you think about what happiness is and where happiness comes from, the vast majority of our happiness, in my experience, comes from being happy with yourself or happy with ourselves. So if we don't tick that box, if we don't have that as a foundation, it's difficult to kind of layer anything else on top of it. Most people are, I think, trying to. One of the things that I describe is that our ego tries to fill the void, fill that hole where self-worth should be. So, our ego will work overtime to earn more money to try and make us feel more successful, get an award, get some recognition, get other people's respect, be validated, be popular, be this, be that, in order to feel like we're good enough. Well, fundamentally, we need to feel that we are good enough already. And if we already feel good enough, we don't need any of that stuff. And we don't really care whether anybody else likes us or not, because kind of we're happy with ourselves. We don't care whether they agree with us, because we're already happy with ourselves. That's the foundation. And I think when we've got that, we're able to be more positive, possibly take a different viewpoint on things, not get wrapped up in the melodrama. When we're in that position, we tend not to judge, and I think that's a really valuable thing that I've developed over the past few years. The ability to sort of just transcend judgment, because quite frankly, it's just overrated. It tends to be very, very negative, to the point where I'll often not have an opinion on something because actually, an opinion would require judgment, and judgment's not very good for you. So,
I posted something obviously earlier about something that I had no control over. I was just like, I don't generally share this kind of news, but it was something that was just like, I needed addressing and get off my chest for some sort of that spur of that moment. I was just like, yeah, it's not a nice road to go down to.
But yeah, it's got, it kicks off a cycle, I think, judgment, which is, if we compare ourselves to others and if we judge, we also become worried that they're judging us, which kind of leads us into paranoia, which fuels our insecurity. And usually it started with insecurity in the first place. The reason why people compare themselves to others or judge other people is usually to try and feel a little bit less inferior and a bit more superior. If we look around the world and say, oh, that's not very good, they're not very good, whatever, we think it will help us to feel like we're better, like we're good enough. It doesn't. It has the opposite effect, because it gets us caught up in that, kind of cycle of, fearing that they might be thinking about us or have an opinion on us, wondering what they're thinking, paranoia. Paranoia is the fear of what we think other people might be thinking, what we imagine they're thinking. And, it just compounds and compounds and compounds if we're not careful. So, to be able to just step out of that cycle and say, look, live and let live. You are who you are. You make your choices. That's absolutely fine. If that's the way you want to go, you go that way. I'll go my way. You go yours. I'm not better. You're not worse. It's fine.
And what does integrity mean to you? Because I have a strong sense of I know what it is, but I would like your viewpoint of it, because how I see it is, doing the right thing when no one's watching, right? Similar to what you spoke about earlier about whether you pay the team or you pay yourselves as the directors first, and then you chose to pay the team. And generally, most other companies, organization would probably go pay ourselves first before paying the team, right? Just let the staff go. That's where redundancies happen, right?
Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, the integrity, I think, has got a few different. There's a couple of different ways of flexing it. One is to really do what you genuinely promise and do what you say you're going to do. It is being congruent with your own values, and it's doing things for the right reason. Absolutely. One of the as a philosopher, Joseph Piper, a German philosopher, who says that it really comes down to doing the right thing for the right reason. And some people will do the right thing because they're being watched, because there's a reward or a consequence. But to do the right thing for the right reason is to do the right thing purely because it's the right thing to do, and for no other reason. If you weren't being watched, if nobody could see, if nobody would be judging you on it or anything like that, what would you do? And I think that's where you see the almost like the true essence of people's character, because one thing that I think is fundamental to character is there's a moral dimension to it. It's not just the mental dimension that makes us different; it's the moral dimension as well. So yeah, there's a huge moral component, and to a certain extent, there are some semantics around this. The difference between, for example, integrity and sincerity. But really, it's it's just a slightly different way of seeing the same thing. Sincerity is probably more meaning what you say, but it comes from the same place, because integrity and sincerity are going to come from the same place ultimately.
And is it more important now, especially in this world of digital leadership, the new digital world where people are appearing more online? Whatever they post online stays online.
Yeah. And I think whether it's online or offline, if you get to know somebody over a period of time, the chances are you're probably going to get to know them quite well, and you'll be able to see the real person after a while. It's very difficult for humans to hide their real self, their true self, for a period of time, especially when we're presented with challenges constantly. Ultimately our real self will come out. This is why within Success Engineers, Dino and I talk a lot about having a character-led business. Making sure that we get our own character right, so that we can go and, yes, make better decisions, but also just be better in our business. Serve our customers better. Serve the world around us in a better way. That all comes, it all emanates from within. So having a real core of strong character, I think, makes a massive difference.
And I suppose that's much as well that affects social media and how you show up.
Yeah, completely.
What you post, what you comment on, how you come across.
Yeah,
as leaders of your own business as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to kind of just do it authentically, do it as the real you, do it as the genuine you, probably doesn't mean that you're squeaky clean and whiter than white all the time. But it does mean that you are happy showing the world the real you. There's at the heart of our self-worth, I think I describe it as there being three strands of rope. One is to be yourself, the other's to know yourself, and the third one is to like, love, and accept yourself. And you can't do one without the other. That's why they're three interwoven strands of rope. So we have to be ourselves in order to know ourselves. We have to like and love and accept ourselves in order to be ourselves, and therefore to know ourselves, etc. So yeah, that kind of being authentic, genuinely being yourself, I think is critical. And over time, people find out, humans have got a pretty good antenna for these sorts of things. I think, a good spidey sense, as they say in the Marvel movies, for these sorts of things. So yeah, I think it's critical that we build ourselves from the inside out, so that we can genuinely be the way we want to be.
I think that's something that we don't discover or know ourselves enough, or take the time out to know ourselves. I think that's why so many people get lost in that process.
Yeah. And like you said, for all sorts of reasons, the world moves at a very, very fast pace. People are constantly doing things. And, I was chatting to a business group a couple of weeks ago about a challenge that I set for the coaching and sort of management team of a professional football club, a Premier League football club, years and years ago. And it was one of the greatest challenges that they faced, which will sound bizarre when I describe it to you, because it was 24 hours of silence. That was the challenge, 24 hours of silence in a monastery, no phones, no Wi-Fi, no nothing. And it was a huge, huge challenge for them. And some of them kind of thought of it as a threat to start with. There's no point in doing that, waste of time. What are we supposed to gain? We could do something kind of productive. Why are we doing this? And actually, they were petrified of having what I call the void. Because when we have that time where we're not embedded in our phones and, heads buried in our phones or doing something, that's the time when we might self-reflect. And a lot of people, because that time self-reflection is like facing a mirror, they might look at the mirror and say, I don't like you. and that becomes a problem for them. So they end up filling all of that potential self-reflection time with stuff, usually guff, in order to avoid the void. And I was talking to this group about the importance of embracing the void. Don't avoid the void, embrace the void. Have more self-reflection time, because without it we can't do the knowing ourselves, and therefore the being ourselves, and the like, loving and accepting ourselves. And if we look in the mirror and we don't like what we see, let's make some deliberate attempts and intentional moves to change it. Become the person you want to be.
And that's also a sense of people fearing to change, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Because most people are more comfortable with a known quantity than an unknown. So yeah, part of it is that. But and for some people, it's not knowing whether they can change, not knowing whether they can become the person that they want to be. And sometimes, again, it's simple, but it's not easy. If you know how to, and that's fairly simple, it's not rocket science, and you've got the intention to, you genuinely want to, you've got the two most powerful ingredients. And of those, the intention to, the desire to change, is the most powerful of the two. Because honestly, if you genuinely want to change, you'll find out how.
Especially when, if the doctor says so in your health report, something needs to change. Otherwise, you're going to go through this pathway, this negative pathway of body destruction or something, or having a poor health.
Yeah, but actually, again, if you think about happiness, if our happiness is primarily driven by our happiness with ourselves, it makes sense to become the person we want to be, and become somebody who we can look at in the mirror and say, I like you, I'm happy with you, because that's going to form the foundation of our happiness. So,
and if there was any advice or personal experience that you want to share with the audience, for those that are getting started in business, or those already in business, leading a team or building a team, what kind of advice would you give them?
For somebody starting out in business, I'm going to permanently borrow one of Dino's phrases for this. Business is a theory. There isn't a blueprint. You're going to have to learn your way through it. You will make mistakes. If you just imagine it like learning to walk, if you ever watch kids learn to walk, there's one thing they do far more than any other, and that's fall over. You're not going to avoid falling over. If you think about, that babies have got this incredible learning ability. They get up, they fall over, they get up, they fall over. Interestingly, they don't fall over the same way twice. So when they've kind of fallen over one way, they think, oh, I'll need to balance a bit differently, and they fall over another way. It's not conscious, it's subconscious, but they're always changing, always flexing and changing. It's an incredible sort of learning power that they have, which we tend to lose as we get older. And one of the reasons for it is that falling over isn't wrong to a baby. It's not failure, and it's not wrong. One of the reasons that adults, probably most of them, couldn't go through that process now is that they get up, fall over, get up, fall over, get up, fall over a third time and go, I can't do this. It's impossible. I tried it 3 times. It doesn't work. That's not what babies did. Babies kept going because falling over wasn't wrong. If we just accept the fact that we can learn our way through this, if we switch on all of our kind of learning capability, view this like learning to walk, just like a baby would, we would become brilliant at it. So it's just opening ourselves up to that. And Dino and I also talk about the difference between looking for an answer and solving a problem. Looking for an answer is almost like, somebody please tell me the answer. I want to know the answer. Give me an answer. Solving a problem isn't that. It's the complete opposite. It's getting into it and solving the problem. Try something, see how it goes, solve the problem as you go. And, entrepreneurialism in its rawest sense is all about problem solving. So let's get back to learning how we did when we learned to walk. Be an entrepreneur, embrace that entrepreneurial journey. If we did that, I think we'd get an awful long way an awful lot quicker. We'd get far more out of it.
And then for those that are already in business, who's going through some challenges right now, building a team or, and all those, what would you advise or help them with?
First thing, probably go back to the fundamentals, go back to passion and value. A while ago, I was looking at the real sort of common characteristics, the foundational characteristics of massively successful entrepreneurs. And the first one, the one that all the others are built upon, is they found a valuable problem in the world that they care passionately about solving. So they've glued together the value bit and the passion bit. It's a valuable problem in the world. So finding a solution it's not just valuable for me, it's probably valuable for millions of other people, which means they'll probably pay good money for the solution. So they found a valuable problem in the world and they care passionately about solving it. So they'll go at it long enough and keep going for long enough that they'll make it work. If you look at how long it took Amazon to grow and become profitable, or you could take a whole plethora of household name businesses now and look at how long it took them to get there. It's years. It's probably far more years than you would ever imagine. And you only see them when they kind of break through and become a global success. It's one of those myths of overnight success. It never happens overnight. What you don't see is the 8 or 10 years of Jeff Bezos working in his back bedroom to get it all kick-started before it started to lift off into the stratosphere. Most of these businesses, Airbnb, the guys were sleeping on floors and always, went bust 2 or 3 times before they had their lucky break, and they were doing it for years and years and years. So, anybody take apart their story, find out what happened before they became an overnight success. And that's what will tell you what you need to do.
Awesome. And if they wanted to find out more about you, where can they go and connect with you?
So hopefully, if you put the words Simon Hartley and Be World Class into Google, it should come up with hopefully our website, which is be-world-class.com. Hopefully the LinkedIn profile pops up and you find the YouTube channel, which is also at World Class Simon, or the Twitter handle, which is at World Class Simon. Dive into any of those and hopefully you'll find a bunch of free resources. There's videos out there. We've got a free mental toughness in 5 steps program on our website that's available to anybody. There's a bunch of stuff out there, as well as books and articles and all sorts of bits and bobs.
And I'll make sure to put the links in my blog as well, linking to this podcast.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you again so much, Simon. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.